Welcome back everyone to another episode of All About Mechanics. Now today is going to be Sunspire. Of course this is on Veteran. We're going to show you the hard modes as well. There are 3 major bosses in here and they all have their own unique hard modes. This is the first time this has been introduced in any of the trials. It's been out for a little while now, but the guide is of course now ready. So we're going to have a mixture of experiences in the group. We are going to put a big shout out there to Jedi Order on PlayStation NA for helping out with the video. And hopefully by the time this is over, you're going to understand all the basic mechanics and be able to do this yourself, if not at least get in a good position to start practicing. Here we go. So, of course, just like any other trial All About Mechanics video, we're going to go through the whole thing. We're going to show you the ads and stuff as well, because some of them are very unique to this particular trial. In fact, lots of them are very unique to this particular trial. You'll see some very familiar mechanics, but the enemies are all quite new, especially the giant cats. Now, when you first come into here, you're obviously presented with a bit of a dialogue from Naviintaas, who's above our head there. More about him later, but there are 3 dragons, essentially. There's him, who's the last boss, then there's a frost dragon and a fire dragon. You can do the 2 first dragons in any order you like. It's entirely up to you, but you will have to obviously fight that one last. You can't go to him until the other 2 are dead. In his first ad pool, you want to stack stuff up as much as possible in any ad pool anyway, but here you are introduced to these new Sench-Rat type cats. Now basically they will have rather nasty heavy attacks, which the tank should be able to maintain survival throughout as long as they block them. But there is one specific mechanic that you may or may not have seen there, but you'll see it again definitely, and that is that they jump. When they jump, everyone needs to block because they're going to land on the ground and the AoEs will stun you. These guys here are very important. You must take out these fates very, very quickly, otherwise that will happen. Big meteor that lands on people's heads, you've got to spread out and block. You overlap those, you're going to die. Be very, very careful not to stack on each other's feet when that happens. It's really, really important. Now, there are multiple different other cats that will come in. We've got this dude here. As a tank, you want to kind of keep that face away from the group. The 2-handers are quite nasty. They do have a little bit of a cleave in front of them, so be very careful with those. They're not priority targets. You do want to make sure you get the fates first, but you do want to kill them, obviously, nonetheless. Now, these cats, you can either split them up or stack them together. It's entirely up to you. They both do a nasty jump mechanic. They do have heavy attacks, but also one of them's got nasty shock stuff as well, so be very careful of that. If anyone's got the shock AoE on them, they need to separate themselves from the group. Again, you can see the AoEs that go across the ground there. That is when they jump. They'll jump, they'll land on the ground, and they'll put that stuff out and knock people over. To prevent that, again, very clearly, just block it. Even if you're a DPS, block that attack. Otherwise, it gets a little bit messy and people start dying very, very quickly. Now, this is a full-length trial. We do have 2 different directions that we can go. You can go left or right. However, we've chosen to go left. But it's not like Cloud Rest or Asylum Sanctorum or anything like that. This is a full trial, so you do have a lot of enemies to deal with. So most of the time taken is actually going to be on the ads in here, or the trash packs, whichever you want to call them. The boss fights themselves, of course, are quite lengthy because they do have a lot of health, but there's so much running around and so many enemies to deal with. If you want to go for speedruns or just make it faster for yourself in general, it's all about the ads. Stack them nice and clean, get them down with as much area of effect as possible, and then that will alleviate a lot of wasted time. Otherwise, if you're built just for single target, yeah, of course you might kill the boss a little bit faster, but you're going to spend much, much more time on all these big trash pulls, which inevitably will make your runs slower. So just make sure you're equipped for that. This particular pull here, you want to try and put everything in the corner where those stairs are, just on the center of the screen there. If you can't make it, obviously don't panic too much because there's a lot of range stuff. But if your tanks are quite experienced with range pulls, they'll know to obviously get out of their range and pull them backwards so they can all stack up nice and clean. Again, order of priority, as per usual, they are going to be the fates. You must kill the fates as soon as possible. Watch out for the will, obviously, because they do have a 2-hander and they can bleed and a cleave, kind of area of effect attack in front. You don't want to get hit by that if you're a DPS or a healer. The tank should be fine, but of course make sure you maintain heals on them. The cats do need to be pulled in as much as possible, but they will jump around the room. Just remember, you must block if they jump. All you need to do is block. You don't need to run away because they'll get you anyway. Again, the reason the fates have to die first, as you saw there were 2 meteors. 2 people got picked as targets. They had 1 each. They had to spread out and block it. If you don't block it, you're dead. And if you stack them, you're dead. So be very, very careful. If you are the one with the meteor on you, just pay attention to your feet. Move away from the group. Don't run into them. I've seen lots of people who have negative effects on them running into the group thinking it's going to save them. No, you're just going to go in and kill everyone. Don't be that person. Just like Sanctum Ophidia, when you get the poison on you, if you run into everybody else, you're going to hurt them. It's on you. Wherever your feet go, it will go. Just for reference, by the way, this is the Easy Sorc, of course. But it's on a very, very low version of the Easy Sorc. This is pre-Champion Point 2.0, and I'm around 600, I think. So no flat stat increases, no slottable stuff, really old stuff. So this is even more effective now than it ever was before, but it was still absolutely fine even back then. Anyway, another corridor full of ads. This is quite simple. Stack the cats in the corner. That actually does help if you've got Easy Sorc, by the way, because the mines will hit 3 of them at once if you've got a good tank. But anyway, you've seen those before. They do have lightning, so be careful. If it's on you, keep it away from the group, much like the overchargers in some of the Craglorn trials. Now, this pull is death for most people. Some like to hide behind here so you can line of sight the enemies up towards the steps and stack and burn them. That will take a bit of practice. Failing that, you want your tanks to split them into 2 groups. You've got to make sure that the group does focus heavily on the fates. And, of course, make sure that if any of those cats jump, you do block right away. Because if you get caught by a meteor, by a fate, or by a cleave by one of the wheels, at the same time as getting jumped on by a cat, you are inevitably going to die rapidly. So this can get quite aggressive. Most groups tend to wipe here at least once or twice in their first couple of runs trying to get this right. So you can stack the 2-handers on the fates, that's absolutely fine, but it is risky, so just be careful that you don't stand in front of them and let the tanks do their job. All these smaller ads do hit fairly hard, but they do tend to die to area effect if you are focusing on the main targets anyway, so they don't become that much of a problem. As you can see, the cats are pinned right in the corner over there, keeping them way away from the fight. That is an option. You can do that if you choose to. Just be very, very careful, of course, again, because when they do jump and they do add the lightning AoE to the group, that can happen and people can die very, very quickly. So try not to hard stack too much when that happens. Yes, you've got to deal with the blocks. Yes, you've got to deal with the lightning. As you can see, they took an abundance of lightning damage. It's quite messy. And there are people jumping around with lightning AoEs on them. Just remember, you have to separate yourself from a group if it happens. It is a rough pull, and most people die there. Don't panic if you don't get it right the first time. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's the same for all trials. There's always going to be that nasty pull, and this, unfortunately, is that pull. So it can get tricky. Plus, my resistances suck, so I'm allowed to die. Anyway, now we're going to go up to the boss. We are going to show you the hard mode. We're not going to show you the regular one, then the hard mode. We're going to go straight in with all the hard modes, but I'm going to explain the differences as we go. The major difference for this one is that we don't have as many ice portals or pillars to deal with, and of course you don't have to have Naviintaas in the room, adding some extra spice to it. But here's the thing you must note for this fight. You need 3 groups of people. Call it 1, 2, and 3 if you like. Some people like to confuse it and go 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and all that kind of stuff. Just have 3 groups of 2. So group 1, group 2, group 3. Nice and simple. Now the reason for that is because you are going to get pillars at the back of the room, ice pillars, that the boss will spawn. And you need to run into them, try to be full health because it takes 70% of your health off, and freeze yourself in that pillar. Now, once you are encased, you have an 8-second timer on you where basically if you don't get healed to full, you're going to die. The reason you have to get into the pillar because if you don't, everyone in the room is going to take massive ice damage and wipe, so make sure you're there quickly, and the healer needs to focus you. Now, once that's done, you will have a debuff on you for a period of time where you cannot do that again. So that's why you have 3 groups. You go in on the first one, or second, or third, whichever one is yours, and then you wait until your turn again. Now, yes, shit can happen sometimes, and people can overlap. Just bear in mind who did and didn't go into them, and that would be much, much easier for you to recover and get back into some form of order. Also, bear in mind, on normal, there is only 1 pillar. On hard mode, there are 2. So on normal, it's group 1, group 2, group 3, which is 1 person each. On hard mode, it's still 3 groups, but there's 2 of you each. Remember that, it's very, very important. Now, just like every other mechanic in the game, there is, of course, a tell for it. The game developers did design this for you to be able to see or hear what's going on. The boss will actually spit into the air when he does the ice mechanic, so keep an eye on that. Now, during the fight, of course, we do have to deal with these. You'll have Flame Atronachs, which do not appear on the regular version. It's only on hard mode that the tank needs to pull into the group so you can kill. But then you've got these Storm Atros and Ice Atros. The Storm Atros are the ones that must be killed, and then the Ice Atro has to be pulled into the circle that they leave on the ground. So the Atronach will explode as lightning on the floor, put the ice one in there, and they'll take massive damage and go very, very low. That's when you can finish them off. If you don't, you're going to be there a very, very long time. Just bear in mind, of course, the Flame Atros do end up exploding if you don't kill them fast enough, so make sure you get those down nice and quick. But your main priority, of course, above that is to get that Storm Atro down, make the big circle happen, and bring the ice one into it. Do not stand in front of the ice Atro if you're not a tank, because you will die. Also, there are fire explosions or circles that you can see when the Atros do spawn in the room, the flame Atro there. Remember, you have to focus them, but there is a tell for that too. That's the ice pillar I was telling you about earlier. Go into it, get healed. Once you're fully healed, you'll break out of it. If it's not done within 8 seconds, you're going to die. So people need to be nice and quick on those heals. When this happens, there are 3 phases for this, by the way, and they are health-based. So at 80%, 50%, and 20%, you'll have a massive wave of enemies. There will be Storm Atros and Ice Atros. The tanks need to grab the ice ones nice and quick, and everyone should be focusing the same target at the same time if they can to get these Storm Atros down. Then the tank can bring it over and put it in the nasty AoE to make it die. Naviintaas is in the room right now, casting lots of nasty stuff. That only happens on hard mode. You don't get that on the regular vet, but you do get this. This beam here, you have to block this. So stand still, block it, you'll be fine. On hard mode, it has a very different mechanic. As you can see, we've got these nasty circles around us. This is where, of course, not only do we have to block the big beam, but we also have to coordinate enough to be able to be spread out, stay in heals, but don't overlap the circles. They will do pulsing lightning damage, and people will die very, very fast. If you have the heals down and everyone is separated, you will be just fine. Don't run around the room like a headless chicken. Again, on the regular vet version of this, you don't have to worry about the mechanic because it doesn't exist. The beam still exists, but it's just a beam. In the meantime, there are some other mechanics for the boss, so pay close attention to what's going on the ground. He is flying all over the place, and he will charge across the floor and do lightning breath. You have to watch out for that. But then when he comes back down, you go back to the boss and just fight him on the spot. However, if you have an overlap and you do have more Atros left in the room, you are going to have to focus them, because otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed. They do spawn throughout the fight anyway, but if you've got leftovers, you want to get rid of them nice and quick. As you can see there, the fire burst has spawned an Atro. We've still got to kill that flame Atro. It's got to die. And we are now getting slightly overwhelmed. So you have to pull back a little bit, try not to panic, get your reses in, and start controlling the fight a little bit cleaner. So the tanks need to grab the big stuff. You need to make sure you're picking people up. If you don't pick people up, you're going to have no one for the ice pillars, and you are going to eventually die. So recover nice and clean, kill the Storm Atros, pin the Ice Atros in their circle, and continue from there. These are your priority. The boss can take actually as long as you like. There's no rush to kill the boss, but you have to pay close attention to the ads. Much the same as most fights in the game, the ads are the problem. The mechanics are the problem. The boss is just extra fluff in the room. There's no real DPS race to kill the dragon. It's the rest of the stuff that has to go. So, while it is obviously helpful to have a lot of damage, what you really need to do is make sure you're focusing what you do have. Storm Atros first, Ice Atros second, Flame Atros whenever they spawn. If there's nothing else to kill, get back on that dragon. Again, you will have to deal with the ice pillars. As you can see, I've got a debuff on the far right hand side of my buff counter on the bottom of the screen there. If I have that, I can't go in the ice. So just bear in mind, if you are group 1, 2, or 3, if you've got that on you, doesn't matter which order it's in, you can't go. So you will have to coordinate that. Something I didn't mention at the beginning, by the way, is the main caller out of mechanics is actually the off tank at the back. They could be the main tank if you want to stay ranged, but it's a tank at the back. They can see when the ice pillars are up if people aren't paying attention to the dragon's face when he shouts in the air. So keep an eye on the dragon, he shouts there's some ice, or listen to the tank at the back, they can call it when it comes up. These little whirlpools here. You can range taunt the tank from there and constantly use reflect or absorb abilities to take his ice attacks, or you can have a main tank at the front keeping up a debuff while the one at the back just keeps an eye on stuff and pulls ads nice and quickly. Whichever method you decide is entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong for that, it just depends on what you're more comfortable with. Now, as you can see, this is one of those situations where it can escalate rather rapidly in terms of danger. Things do mount up quite fast on hard mode. On regular vet, it's not so bad at all. There's no flame atros. There's no extra staggering effects of all these extra ads. They just come in per flying phase. So we are obviously receiving some additional mechanics that you wouldn't usually see in the form of extra ads. Double pillars, extra ads. That's the major change. And of course, his breath, when you do block it, you have the circle area around you, whereas on the regular you don't. From here, it's rinse repeat. You just maintain it. Now, a bit of a tip for you if you are good at coordinating with your group. If you do get to the flying phase, so 80%, 50%, and 20%, what you can do is you can make your group all go to one side of the room. Don't stack, obviously, if you're on hard mode, because the lightning effects will kill you all, but move all together. That way it gives the tanks room to pull the adds, they can cluster them up nice and quick, and you can actually take advantage of a lot of area of effect. While you're not actually hitting the ice attros, you're hitting the lightning ones, you will obviously splash damage them all, and it will help them get down a lot quicker, especially when they go low health. It's a lot easier to control things if the main force of the group is out of the way of the danger and the tanks can control the adds. If you start scattering, it's a mess. As you can see here, we try to stay quite focused on where we are, and the main taunters and such are on the back of the room. Also, a small point as well, as you can see, the second healer is actually at the back of the room, keeping an eye on the ice pillars just in case somebody gets caught in them, because they will, and then that means they can heal nice and quickly, rather than staying at the front and having to run across the room again. So, formation-wise, if you want to help fix a few issues that you may or may not have, make sure you have a tank and a healer at the back. Just one is fine, one of each. Here, you saw this already, block the beam, stay in heals, spread out so you don't shock everyone, and then go back to normal. And as you can see here, the whole all move to one side idea, the adds are all in one place, it's a lot easier to deal with. You will get targeted burst damage, kind of like a big ball of ice aimed at individual players, which you will have to block. It's very similar to the Fate mechanic. Don't stand in the middle of the group, just block it out in the open and you'll be fine. Naviintaas is going to keep annoying us by throwing out Atros and all that extra stuff. They are not on the regular version. The Flame Atros don't exist there. Now, again, this is rinse repeat. So we're going to speed this up just a little bit so you don't have to keep seeing the same thing over and over and over, but it is that much. All the way to execute. Then you have to be a little bit more aware of the mechanics because it gets a little bit riskier. Yes, I know it's really funny with the chipmunk noises. Anyway, to cut this down a little simpler, once you've already listened to the rest of the stuff, pay attention to your three groups with the ice pillars, pay attention to your feet, focus the storm atros at all times. Then the ice ones have to go down as fast as possible. Adds, then the boss, adds, then the boss. The boss can take as long as you like, but the adds are key. When it comes to the breath, block it and don't stack. That way you'll be fine and you won't kill your group with lightning. One final thing to note, by the way, obviously this is for the tank. You will have a breath to deal with, so make sure you block that. It hits very, very hard. Probably harder than some fire mechanics, in fact. Ice hits really hard in PvE. And also you'll have individual snowball attacks, basically. You can absorb them or you can block them. It's entirely up to you. Big circle under the tank, under the dragon rather, by the way. Do not stand in it. No matter what you are, you will die. Now, when it comes to execute, things switch up a little bit. Obviously, the last phase is at 20%. That's when you have the last phase of adds. The boss will go up in the air. You've got your breath mechanic. You've got all that good stuff. You've seen it all before. Kill the lightning atros, stack the ice in the lightning circle, and kill them as efficiently as you can while maintaining, obviously, focus on the flame atros. I can't stress this enough. Adds are key, and so are the pillars. So when we get into execute, that's when you really have to start focusing. You won't have any more of this drama to deal with, but you will have the atros, you will have the ice pillars. Lots of people forget about that stuff when the boss's health is low. Do not get execute panic and start doing stupid stuff. Now, the part where I told you it changes, well, not so much. What you will have to do now is just change your mentality. Instead of let's go and burn the crap out of stuff, now, more than ever, focus on your basics. Get rid of those adds, then hit the boss. Get rid of the adds, then kill the boss. If you don't, and your damage is low, it's still fine, you can still kill the boss. But if your damage is low, you will end up getting overwhelmed with adds, the tanks will struggle, and inevitably it's going to be a wipe. So pay very close attention to your basic mechanics in this fight. Do not stand in the big circles of dead, because obviously they're going to be there right at the front of the group, so be very careful. And always, always maintain that awareness of those ice mechanics at the back of the room. People still must get in those portals. If you've got loads of damage, you may be able to nuke through this and hide the adds at the back of the room, but I wouldn't recommend it if you are not experienced, because it's going to get really, really tricky. As you can see there, the boss is dead and I'm still in the pillar. You must focus heavy mechanics when it's low health, because that's the most crucial point in time. Now, as a bit of a recap, it's actually quite a simple fight. It just looks really, really messy and can get messy quite quickly. Storm Atros are priority. They will help you kill the Ice Atros. The pillars must be followed. You must go into them. You must free up the group from all that ice damage. And you must kill the flame atros. There are 80% and 50% and 20% phases where the boss will go up. You've got to block the beam and spread out and stay in the heals. And you've got to block the big circle AoEs that hit you on the head if they do, because you get targeted individually. That's pretty much it. The common misconception is that you must have loads and loads and loads of damage in order to kill the dragon. No. You just need to apply yourself in single target or AoE or a combination of the two when it comes to the adds. The dragon can take as long as you like. Now you're going to be introduced to some new enemies. These ad pulls look scarier than the last one, where the big cats killed us, but they're not actually quite as bad. You do have to make sure you stack the melees on top of each other, and if you can help it, stack them on the fates. The fate's your primary target. As you can see here, big meteor, block it and stay out of the group. That is going to be a problem, but once the meteors land, however, I did forget to mention this earlier, there is a whirlwind that comes out. You can kill the whirlwind, but basically just stay out of it. It's nice and simple. Fates are always priority. You are going to see some sword and board cats. You're also going to see some nasty jumpy cats as well. They are quite a bit of they're a bit of a pain, to be honest. Let's not lie. They jump, you don't block, you fall over. We've seen them before, but there are going to be a few of them, so be very, very careful. There's a couple coming in from the left over there. Make sure the tank grabs them nice and quick. And again, there's one from the right. Make sure you block whenever they jump. Whether they're hitting you or not, you've got to watch that AoE, because otherwise it's going to be a stun fest. Stack them, burn them, move on to the next ad pull. Don't run around the room in circles trying to chase them. They will run away, but they'll always come back again because they are melee based, so don't panic if you are a tank thinking you lost taunt. You can see the taunt on them. It's a black square with a broken shield debuff on it. If you're the tank taunting and that debuff is on them, don't worry, you've got the aggro. Now, there are a lot of chests in here, so you might want to slow down a bit and look for some shinies, but that's not going to be shown in the video. They're just loads of them. We've got some, not quite dual wield. They are punchy cats. They hurt. Really fast-paced punching cats. Big groups of them. Make sure you stack and burn them nice and quickly. When they do that effect there, they'll do a massive fire spread out AoE. You don't want to get caught in it. So when the pull happens, as DPS, you want to step back a bit, wait for that to finish, and then come back in. Even chunky tanks can die to that, so be careful. Now, we are going up against the Fire Dragon. We're going to kill YOLO. We are, of course, going to show you the hard mode version, not the regular one. I'm just going to talk about the differences in the regular one. Obviously, less health is a good start. But this one isn't that different, to be perfectly honest. It's not a very difficult one in comparison to the last one with all the manner of different complicated mechanics, but it can be quite unforgiving in how hard they hit. Now, just like the last dragon, you do need groups of people, but this time you need two groups of DPS and healers, basically, stacked together. So 5 and 5. You can see there we've got two. One to the right, one to the left. The reason we stack is because that big pulse and AoE under our feet right now, we share the damage. If you don't have enough people in it, people will take too much and they'll die. So keep your heals up. Keep in your formation. You can see that we try not to deviate too far left and right. It's going to be quite simple. You do have this time stop ability that you don't really want to get caught in. That is going to be more relevant when it gets to the last boss, because that does actually have an additional effect. But don't get caught in it, it will stun you. In the meantime, there will be flame atros in the group, and it's the opposite type to what we saw before. Before, we pull them into the group and kill them. Now, do not do that. There are some advanced methods that allow you to. Don't do it until you're experienced, because when they die, they'll put a big lava circle on the ground, and you will die. So you want to keep them as far back as possible, and when they spawn, turn on those while staying in your clustered groups and kill them as fast as you can. If you end up with loads of them, the room's going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be a mess. Now, there are 3 major phases, just like the last one, and of course, bear in mind, the tank will have to be very chunky, because the punches from the dragon, or bites rather, from the dragon, and the breath is quite strong. Not quite as strong as the ice dragon, though, I don't think. It doesn't feel that way anyway. Now, this channeled fire, guys, that's coming out from underneath our feet, you can block the last attack if you want to, because it is quite strong, but if you're full health, you should be absolutely fine. But when the dragon goes up in the air, and sounds like he shouts poop nah, don't ask me why, but that's kind of stuck on the stream, you will have these atros to deal with. Now, they do spawn throughout the fight, and the longer it takes you to get into that phase, obviously the more of these you'll get, but you want to stand on the side of the room, because he is blasting the floor full of fire. Now, when that happens, these will be affected with this mechanic where they are glowing and their damage is heightened, the damage that you do to them. So it escalates rapidly in order for you to get rid of them, and you do want to get rid of them before you go back to the dragon. However, there's a bit of a bonus here. with them taking an accelerated amount of damage, that does also apply to base mechanic rules. That being, if you splash damage one of the targets with a heavy attack from a lightning staff, then the enemy will get hit as hard as the other one does in area of effect. Which means if you were very, very sneaky, you could stack them on the dragon as he comes down, heavy attack the iron atro, and the splash damage will hit the boss as hard as it hits that. With the scaling effects to that particular phase, you can basically hit the dragon sometimes for about 1,000,000 health per tick, depending on your build and your group. That is a very, very advanced tip. You do not have to do that. Just kill the bloody things, but it works. Now, the fight is basically rinse, repeat from there on out. So we'll go over the very important stuff that you have to remember. Stay in your two groups, left and right, so that you can survive that bursting fire mechanic that's going on there. And if you want to, you can block the last tick, just so you don't get killed if you are low health. Keep your healers on point. Keep hitting the dragon, of course, as much as you can, while staying out of stupid. The longer the fight goes on, the more iron atros will spawn at the back of the room, so your tank will have to be quite chunky to deal with too many of them if your DPS is low. If it's high, obviously you'll only get about 2. If it's low, you might see 4 of them. Be prepared for that, and treat them just the same as you would the iron atro in Bloodroot Forge. They're basically the same mechanics. The tank on the left-hand side will have to watch for the breath. Don't get too close, because if you do, he gets pissy and he'll knock you backwards. So have a little bit of distance on him. And when the flying phase happens, get to the edge as soon as possible, so that then you can start damaging those atros for when they go into their molten phase. That's pretty much it. There's not really too much more stress added to the fight, except for one very important detail. Naviintaas is flapping his wings over there. He's in charge of the nastiness, the time stop and all that stuff. But the flame atros, not the iron atros, the flame atros. I said don't pull them into the group, but I said do make sure you kill them. Why is that? Well, when they die, they put lava on the ground and they blow up. If you don't kill them fast enough, they blow up. And if you don't kill them fast enough in hard mode, they enrage. They go bright blue like the planar inhibitor in White Gold Tower, and everybody gets dead. So be very, very clear. The dragon can take as long as you want if you can maintain survivability with your tank at the back, but the flame atros must die first. If you push the boss quicker, you get less iron atros. If you don't push them quicker, still maintain that very important point. You must kill the flame atros. Here he goes up in the air. He's about to shout poop nah again, or whatever the hell he says. Yes, there's subtitles, I know. It's supposed to be funny. But once he goes into lava or molten mode, get those down again. Move back to the boss when he lands. It's very simple from here on out. They take a massive amount of damage. As you can see, they're taking several 100k a pop. It's absolutely mental, so that phase shouldn't be a problem. And again, shocking, rinse, repeat. These dragon fights are very... what's the word for it? Dramatic, but once you nail down the basics, it is copy and paste, rinse, repeat all the way through. Now, we're going to speed up a little bit just to get to the final phase, because this does again happen at 75, 50, and 25. Then it's time for execute. So we'll speed up. Now, obviously, you don't need to see the whole thing again and again and again, but basically here is just consistency. Keep up your mechanics. Keep it exactly the same as you've been doing it. Don't change stuff. But most people mess things up at execute. So if you don't know what that means, low health basically. When the enemy is low health, people do stupid stuff because they think shouting over the microphone, kill it quick, makes everything all better. No, it doesn't. It makes people panic and it stops you doing what you should be doing. So as you can see there, we had a couple deaths. Recover nice and quickly. Don't put the flame atros in the group. And when it goes low eventually, that's when you want to just keep doing what you were already doing. You don't have to make things overcomplicated. Unless there's a dramatic effect happening at execute, you don't need to change anything. You can see we're still in our two groups. We are still keeping an eye on the iron and flame atros at the back and prioritizing the flame atros obviously when they come in, and everything else stays the same. You will get iron atros coming, as you saw one there. The tank can just hold that at the back of the room. The negative effect to this execute phase is if you don't focus and you do have multiple deaths over and over and you don't recover nice and quick, you will find that the domino effect will start to happen, and you will basically have no one to stay in the circle with. You will have no one to tank with or heal with, and you'll all die together. You have to stay consistent. You have to focus. But also one more thing, if you don't kill the boss quick enough, you will of course get more and more and more iron atros at the back of the room. So for some groups that are ultra squishy, that may be a problem. You might want to boost your DPS. But for groups that are built for survival and sustain and recovery and all that good stuff, then of course if you can maintain survival at the back of the room as a big chunky tank with multiple Atros, then your DPS is not a problem. It depends on your group. Just because very squishy tanks might die to 2 or 3 or more, doesn't mean you can't build to take more damage. Your tanks could survive with Magma Shell if you have that particular class, or you could survive with block ultis over and over and over. Multiple different buffs and bonuses and debuffs that you can apply to the enemy to enhance your survivability. Just don't run around the room like a headless chicken, because that's when people will die. So your two options there, apart from maintain your mechanics from start to finish, are big chunky tank or more damage. Either one is absolutely fine. One of the biggest issues you'll find in here is that people in long fights start trying to change their methods halfway through, whereas these fights are actually very, very consistent. If you can get the boss down to 95%, you can get it down to 100, get it down to 0. Technically, unless you fail at the flying phases, in which case you're screwed anyway. Practice, practice, practice. Now, other ad pulls. Yes, I know lots of people try to skip this stuff to go to the beginning to go into the last boss without killing the ads. Don't do that. Kill the ads. You get points for them. And you get loot. Very simple. Big cats, block them when they jump. The melee cats need to be grabbed quickly because, as you saw then, the sword and board dude does dart around the room. It's quite nasty. It's very similar to the destroyer type enemies you'll see in other content, or the Dromaphora sword and boards that you get in VMOL. They will hit you hard, so be careful. The tanks won't get hit too badly by them, but they will get loose into the group occasionally when they start charging, so make sure you're ready to block in case you are being targeted. In the meantime, the guys with the claws do need to be killed rather fast if you can help it. But if you can't kill them nice and quickly, then of course just stay away from them when they're channeling, because otherwise the fire across the floor will hurt. Novas and Permafrosts help in these big ad pulls a lot. Not to mention, of course, they're two different buffs and debuffs, so they do stack. Maim and protection both at the same time. So if you are struggling, maybe you've got loads of glass cannons and no survivability, you might want to incorporate some of those skills. Another nice ad pull here. Make sure your tanks go in first, of course. Do not YOLO, because if you die, it's your own fault. But the claw guys need to be killed, sword and boards need to be handled, and you do have to block when the cats jump. Just be very, very careful. Big channel and circle on the ground, get out of the fire, come back in again. Nice and simple at this point. You've seen everything there is to see. Just make sure you don't do stupid stuff and start running around the room. You see most of us are pretty much staying in the heels and staying together as a group. You may need to spread out occasionally when the mechanics happen, but you don't have to do it all the time. Spread out, come back in again, spread out, come back in again. Just make sure that you know where your team are. Now, as we run to the end here, we are going back into the main door at the front, where we actually do get to see some more enemies, and we have to go and visit Naviintaas, the last boss. We've got a little bit of a gauntlet to go through first. We are going to have to see a rather nasty ad pull that ends up making most people jump off a cliff by accident. This room can be a mess. Easiest way for us as this group was to basically just find a corner and sit in it. Some people like to go to the middle, some people like to do special brave pulls. Basically, just grab the ads, pin yourselves into a corner, and deal with them the same way you did the ones outside. Just remember, of course, the cats do need to be blocked when they jump, because otherwise they'll stun and knock you back, and you will go flying off the edge. If you've been in Sanctum video before, you know what it feels like to fall off the cliff. Everyone is going to laugh at you, but don't worry, everyone does it at least once. The first time is funny, the next time it's your own fault. Stay away from their face, however. You noticed before from previous ads, they do have nasty attacks from the front, which is why the tank should always turn them away from the group. You've got multiple waves here as well, so be very, very careful. You've got the Alkosh dude there with a sword and board. Again, you know what he does. He charges around the room. The cat just jumped on my head because it wasn't aggroed yet, but still, same rules apply. Block it, you'll be fine. If you're full health. If you're not, then I might have died. But turn it away from the group. Much AoE as you can manage. If not, you'll just have to single target them one after the other after the other. But you don't want to bring just single target to this particular trial. Especially not on the last boss. Is it fun to nuke a dragon? Of course it is. But if you have just single target, you're going to struggle when it comes to the ads. Because there are going to be a lot of them. And the clock is a bit against you. It's not quite a DPS race, but there are negative effects to you not focusing particular targets. They will enrage. Now, when we get to the last boss, there is a DPS race for 3 of you. but we'll explain more about that in a moment. Just bear in mind, you want your 3 highest DPS characters in your team, or players, at the same time as having them mechanically aware. So just because you can hit a target dummy really hard doesn't mean that you can do this particular mechanic. You are going to have to practice, you are going to have to get good at it. You need to maintain damage and mechanics at the same time as a trio. Because if one of you dies, the other ones have to pick up the slack, and it's a mess. More on that when we get there. But this is how you get to the last boss. We've got another ad pull as we go. The left side is the ice boss, which you saw. The right side is the fire boss. You can choose whichever way you want to go at the beginning of the trial, but you will eventually open up this particular path. You'll come down to here. Cannot come down here until those 2 bosses are dead. Now, this particular pull can be nasty. As with most trials and dungeons, the way that these are constructed, there is a hitbox in the doorway, and it's kind of a sectioned off one room added onto another. There's a gap in between. So it's very difficult to actually apply light attacks and heavy attacks in the doorway because it's empty negative space. But if you can stack the enemies in the doorway or close to, then of course you can nuke them with area of effect, or just keep them still and deal with them one after the other. You must kill the Fates first. They do drop nasty AoEs on you. You must block it, obviously, if you've got the AoE on you, and you have to get away from the rest of the group. As you can see there, spread out, block, done. But watch out for the winds because they spawn underneath it. As you can see there, although it's pinned kind of in the corner in the doorway, we're not in the doorway. That's when your light attacks and heavy attacks won't go through. So don't go too far, otherwise you're just going to rely on your skills. This is where it gets messy. Now, quite honestly, hard mode and regular is not that different. There are very unique mechanics added, but there aren't many of them. Most of it is borderline copy and paste apart from the extra health, but there is one major difference when it comes to the portal. Now, the boss will fly in the air, much like the other dragons, at health percentages. Now, these percentages are actually at 80, 60, and 40. During those times, you will have a bunch of ads you've got to deal with, and if you don't kill them, you're all going to die. So, bear in mind, you might want to save your ultis for that. In the meantime, however, just before each phase, 10% before in fact, there will be a portal that spawns in the room, and 3 of your teammates need to go down there and deal with a very specific enemy. Now, the servant downstairs, or in the time portal, or wherever the hell that downstairs, upstairs, different realm is, that's when the group will have to focus very, very heavily on survival and damage together. If they succeed downstairs and come back up again, everything's fine, carry on as normal. If they don't succeed, the servant will come upstairs, be invulnerable, and kill everyone. You have 90 seconds to kill the target in the portal. Now, we're going to show you the initial pull, of course, up until that phase, and then we're going to wipe and then start again and put the full hard mode on, just so you can see how the fight kind of starts and then what you're looking for when it comes to that particular mechanic. As you can see here, we've got the basic ad pull. We've got some nasty ones that have the big fire on the ground, which you've got to watch out for. You've got the sword and board guys. You've also got the fates, which have to take priority, obviously. Just stack them as best you can as a group and be very careful where you place your feet. In the meantime, once the ads are over, you do have to deal with these flame atronachs, obviously, because they're going to keep coming into the room. And you also have 3 major fire pops that happen on the ground. There's the first one with AoEs on the ground. There's the second one. And the third one, you have to hide behind the statue. If you don't hide behind the statue, you will die. So basically, the dragon is going to spit 3 major times in the room while placing loads of other negative AoEs on the ground. Then, once that's dealt with and the 3 Atros that spawn at the end pop are dead, you can start fighting the boss. You do have to be aware, by the way, there is a mark for death mechanic. We'll come into that more later as we get into the fight. The tanks do need to be aware of this. But essentially, you hit the boss and just block when he does his big neck swing or when he does his kind of shell type ability. So be really, really careful for those. You will spot them. His knuckle on the right-hand side does actually move when he wants to kind of slam stuff at the group, but he will breathe fire occasionally as well. Simple mechanics, just block. That there, big neck swing, he stood back, swung his head, make sure you block it. Flame Atros will come in, you must prioritize those, otherwise they'll explode in the group. And if you don't, obviously you're going to get overwhelmed. Now, as you can see here at 90%, of course, there is a portal. Now, remember, of course, at 80%, we have the flying up in the air phase. So we need to have this done by the time that happens. Or you can slow down upstairs and wait for the group to finish. Up to you. You can take as long as you want. But downstairs, you've only got 90 seconds. The 3 people that go downstairs must deal with these mechanics. You've got that nasty spread and AoE there that you want to put on the boss because it actually helps. And also you want to watch out for any meteor or splashy type lightning shit that's on the ground. Don't stand in it, it will kill you. You have to maintain your damage and debuffs while surviving this kind of stuff. Be very, very careful. That big triangle mechanic there that you saw, that's very simple. Just stay back and block it. And when you get pinned, someone has to release you. If you don't, they'll die. If you kill this in the time limit, you will, of course, go back upstairs and everything will be fine. But what do you need to know DPS wise to make that happen? On the regular vet, you will need to have 12.9k consistent DPS per person to make sure that you can survive that within 90 seconds. It only has 3.5 million health. You can do it with that amount, so you don't need to be that high. When it comes to the hard mode, it has 11.3 million with the same mechanics, but what you need is 41.8. If each individual member can maintain 41.8k DPS while surviving for 90 seconds and kill that before the 90 seconds is up, you will do it. So, while people shout you need 90k, you most definitely do not. Is it fun to have the extra damage? Yes. Will it help sometimes if you have to drop and block and guard and all the rest of it? Well, it depends on how consistent your overall DPS is in the first place. For most people that have got this far, I would assume that you're easily pushing 50 on your own anyway, so you should be fine. Failing that, just a matter of practice. Get people in there, get them used to it, get them used to the mechanics and such. Once you maintain those dance mechanics, stand out of lightning, picking people up out of the AoE, blocking the big cone, that's when things will start getting a lot easier. Now back to the fight. This is hard mode, obviously. There is a slight difference to this. When those people go downstairs, you will still be on the dragon. Watch that, you need to block. But you don't want to push him too fast, because if you do, you'll push him ahead of time of the people coming up. You want to make sure they come up first. As you can see, although we hide behind these statues during the fire phases when he's up in the air, we now have to fight these things, the statues. So, again, priority target is the Flame Atro. This guy is next. The dragon can be left to his own devices as long as you like. There's no rush. There's also no rush to kill this guy. But there is a very specific mechanic. The boss target, or the ad even, is immune to attacks. Unless he is channeling. Now, when he is channeling, you will all take damage. More and more and more every single tick, but now you can hit him. At the moment, we're just recovering resources because you can still heavy attack him. If you leave him channeling for too long, you will all die. So this is the risk factor. Do you keep hitting him, or do you interrupt him and stop him and have a breather for 30 seconds? The choice is yours. You can go for a nuke if you want, or you can just hit him a little bit, interrupt him, wait, hit him a little bit, interrupt him, wait. Either way, as long as it dies, it's fine. But just bear in mind, of course, if you are one of those people that tries to bash weave all the time, you are going to fuck that up because you are going to keep interrupting him when people want to kill him. Also be aware, Crush and Shock is a no-no unless you want to deliberately interrupt him. So leave him channeling and hit him, let him go back again. So, here is rinse repeat. There's fire bursts on the ground you have to stay out of. There's time stop that you do need to stand in, at least 1 or 2 people, when the enemy is downstairs. That portal phase, if you send someone into the time stop, it will send a buff downstairs that you can actually help to kill that down there faster. So while you did need 41.8k DPS, that actually helps. But you don't want everyone to get caught in it, it's going to fucking hurt. Try to stay out there as a group if you can, and only maintain 1 or 2 of those as and when you need to. Another thing to consider, of course, as well, is if you do get caught in the time stop at the same time as the breath is coming, you will be stunned, of course, and if you haven't broke free quick enough, you will be set on fire and die. Here, it is rinse repeat. Time stop is in the middle, avoid it unless you want the buff downstairs. Flame Atros, primary targets, always focus on them. Dragon, nice and easy, block the big swing, and block if the flame breath is on you. Back here, however, he can't hit you with a swing. So you could play full range if you really wanted to and just block the big stuff. Always kill the Atros, they are priorities. When it comes to 90%, and then to 70%, and then again at 50%, the portals will appear. At 80%, 60%, and 40%, he will fly up in the air. Portals need to be done by that point in time. Slow down if you need to. When he goes up in the air, you will have to kill a big pull of ads. So we're pacing it a little bit here so you can see what's going on. You can take as long as you like here. Just focus. Atro, then the boss. Atro, then the boss. But when those ads do spawn, what happens is they will start chasing people around the room. You will get deaths if you're not careful. So what you really want to do is get your tanks in the middle when the dragon flies off, and get everyone else out of there nice and quick. That way the tanks can start stacking stuff, the DPS and the healers aren't getting nuked, and then you can come back in after it's controlled and start putting down those nasty AoE destros and such, whatever you've got to hand. Apart from that, the fight's pretty much the same all the way through. There is, however, one major mechanic for the tank, and that is mark for death. So basically, when the dragon spits at the tank, they'll have a debuff on them, and if they do it again, they're going to die. That can be ignored on normal, but on veteran, especially hard mode as well, we've got loads of other stuff going on. What you need to do is either dodge roll it, and you'll avoid it completely, or allow the other tank to take over aggro. Get them to taunt instead of you, and it will be all done and rosy once the time is gone. Once it happens to them, you then swap back again. It's nice and simple. You can either dodge it or swap it. Obviously, the boss has gone up into the air. We've got the big ad pull. Kill the fates first, then kill everything else. And again, we'll make this quite clear. Look in the middle of the room there. There's a big circle. There are 3 major pops, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. The last one is the size of the room. So look in the center there. There's the first one. There's the second one. Third one, hide behind the statue, otherwise everyone's going to die. Nice and simple. Boom. Kill the Atros, back in the middle, back on the dragon. Hit him, block the fire, block the swing. Avoid the time stop unless people are downstairs. And if they are, obviously there's a little green thing that they need to pick up depending on what their AoE colors are. And that will help them do more damage to the minion downstairs. So again, while you do need 42k DPS per person while doing mechanics, you do get a boost in there if people stand at the time stop. One more thing to note about the guy downstairs is he will do a channeled effect that does need to be interrupted. Just make sure you do that. Now, we just repeat the mechanics all the way through. Focus the Atronachs. Kill this guy when he's out of immune phase, but interrupt him if you're taking too much damage to give yourself a break. You can take as long as you want from here on out. There is no rush to this whatsoever. The mechanics are all rinse, repeat. Atros, add, dragon. Downstairs, dragon, adds. Back to the beginning again. Now, something that is going to be different is execute. We're going to fast forward a little bit there because the rest of the fight is exactly the same. So after the final flight phase, of course, you've got to deal with another Guardian, and then you end up here. So once it gets down to 31% roughly on hard mode, it's less than that on vet, but the hard mode itself, you are going to have to fight the dragon on the spot. Basically, the same as we have done the whole time. He's going to do the fire breath, he's going to do the big neck swing, and we're going to get negative AoEs on us. As you can see there are meteors. Spread out like hell, stack them on the side of the room, come back in again. If you don't get there quick enough, you're going to drop it in the group, but it's going to stay there. You want to make sure you place these around the room. This may require you, as a group, to start moving to the other side of the dragon instead, but just maintain your positions during the fight, and if you do have the AoEs, drop them outside. If you don't drop them outside, you're going to get overwhelmed, you aren't going to be able to reach, you're going to have a really long time during execute. There's no other really big changes here at execute. Don't stand by the wing too long, by the way, because it'll flap you and you'll go flying off the edge. But this is pretty much rinse repeat again. It's a very repetitive fight, but it can hurt. So again, you can see here these meteors are being spread out over and over and over. We are running out of space here. They are quite fast paced. You have to stay out of the fire, and you still must maintain your priority targets, that being the flame atro. As you can see here, we moved over to the left and swapped places with the tank. All these ones that get in place are filling up the room over and over and over. On regular vet, they will start disappearing. On hard mode, they do not. So, there's not too much stress at the end. But if you do start dying to stupid stuff, it's going to be very hard to recover. It's not a DPS race as such, until the room is full, in which case you're screwed. But it's quite low. So don't panic. Kill the Atros. Drop the meteors at the side. Keep hitting the boss. Block the breath. Block the next swing. Game over. Easy peasy. So, just to recap over that, the hard modes obviously were demonstrated and shown there. There are variations to that. The ice boss, you only have 1 pillar per phase instead of 2, and you don't have all the extra adds. And of course, you don't have the AoEs after the breath. The fire boss, you don't have the enraging flame atros, and obviously it has less health. And the last boss, you have the servant to deal with, who has 11.3 million health instead of 3.5. And of course, you've got the guardians to deal with, and he has more health. Apart from that, the regular to hard mode, there's not that much of a jump. You just have to get the basics in your mind and clear, rather than seeing it for the first time and panicking, because that's what most people do. Anyway, hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. I did have to skip ahead a little bit because some of the fights are quite long, of course, but obviously with practice you can make it quicker. But a big shout out to the Jedi Order on PlayStation NA for helping with the video. Get your practice in. I'm sure you can do it. If you want to see more of this stuff, of course, make sure you hit the subscribe button because there will be many, many more of these. I am behind a little bit, but they're coming. Make sure you hit the notification bell as well. And of course, if you want to help support outside the channel, there are some links in the info section for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, the website ZionNodeGaming.com, where the written guide is. And of course, you can check out Instagram as well. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.